Boom. The ground shook so hard that the cattle scattered in every direction, screaming as dirt flew into the air. One of the men in black tactical gear hit the ground face first, screaming, "It's a trap! It's a trap!" Another dove behind a tree, his helmet flying off as he crawled backward in panic. A third man tried to step forward, but as soon as his boot hit the patch of dried mud near the scarecrow, a loud click echoed through the field. He froze. "Don't move," I whispered through the radio from the barn loft, aiming my binoculars right at him. He looked around, terrified, and yelled, "Who are you?" I smiled. "Just a farmer protecting what's his." And then, click. Let me rewind and tell you how we got here. It all started 3 months ago when I bought an old ranch in Wyoming. My name's Tom Reynolds, a 38-year-old ex-Army engineer, recently retired and trying to find peace in the wide open fields. I wanted nothing but quiet cows and maybe a few chickens. The land I bought was 115 acres of pure gold to me. No neighbors, no traffic, no noise. Or so I thought. I didn't know I was buying into a storm. The first problem showed up the very next week. A bright white truck with a shiny HOA logo parked itself at my gate. A short man with an oversized clipboard stepped out and started taking photos of my fence. I walked up to him calmly, wiping the sweat off my brow. "Can I help you?" I asked. He glanced up from his notes. "You've violated several codes, sir." "Codes?" I laughed. "This is private land. I don't have an HOA." He clicked his pen. "According to our latest expansion, this territory now falls under the Willow Heights Homeowners Association." I blinked. "I don't live in Willow Heights. I live on the ranch I bought from the Garcias." He didn't flinch. "That's now called Willow Heights Ranch subsection B." I stared at him like he'd just grown 2 heads. "You're joking." He shoved a packet into my hands. 25 pages of legal mumbo-jumbo. "You have 30 days to comply. That includes repainting your barn, removing all non-native trees, downsizing livestock to code, and registering your dogs." I looked down at Rusty and Bear, my 2 loyal Great Pyrenees. "Not gonna happen," I said and turned around. Big mistake. 2 weeks later, I came home from the farmer's market and saw that someone had cut my fence. Half my cattle had gotten out, wandering onto the road. One was hit by a truck. I called the sheriff, and he came out and took photos but said there wasn't enough evidence to blame anyone. That night I found a note nailed to my barn door. It read, "Obey or be removed. You've been warned." I installed cameras the next morning. Things got worse. Someone poisoned my irrigation tank. My crops started dying. Then a week later my mailbox exploded when I opened it. Shrapnel hit my left arm and I had to get 10 stitches. The sheriff called it a freak accident, but I knew. It was them. HOA had gone from annoying to criminal. That's when I stopped being polite. I started building. I wasn't just any ex-Army engineer. I specialized in countermeasures and terrain defense. If they wanted a war, I'd give them one. I installed hidden cameras in every tree, built tripwire alarms around my ranch, and trained my dogs with whistle commands for perimeter control. But that wasn't enough. So I took it further. I ordered dozens of non-lethal mines, legal military-grade pressure triggers that explode with sound and paint, not fire or metal. Perfectly legal, terrifyingly loud, and enough to scare any intruder right off the land. I marked the boundaries in my own way, small flags carefully placed. Only I knew the safe paths. And then, I waited. 3 nights later, the motion sensors pinged. I checked the live feed. 2 vans rolled onto my gravel path. 8 men, all in black tactical gear, stepped out armed. They moved in military formation. Not police, not security. Hired guns. They were fast, smart, and ruthless, checking corners, disabling lights. But they didn't know the land like I did. I switched on my headset and watched from my hidden post in the hayloft. They split into 3 teams, moving toward the barn, the chicken coop, and the shed. The first group hit the minefield I had rigged with sonic boomers, non-lethal but loud enough to trigger earthquakes in your stomach. 1 man flew backward and landed in a puddle. The second group triggered the paint mines, Bright blue powder shot into the air, blinding two of them. Screaming. Chaos. But the third team made it to the back of the barn, and one of them climbed the side ladder, right toward me. As he reached the top, I stood silently, holding a rope in my hand. When he peeked over, I yanked it. A giant net dropped over him, pulling him straight off the ledge. He crashed into a pile of hay and didn't get up. The others started panicking, and then in the distance I saw headlights, a black SUV, bigger, heavier, a new player. I zoomed in on my binoculars and saw a familiar face. It was the clipboard guy from the first visit. Only this time, he wasn't holding papers. He was holding a shotgun. He stepped out, shouting to his men, "Get him out now." And that's when I pressed the red button on my wristwatch. I had saved the best trap for last. The creek that divided the north side of my ranch from the east had a small wooden bridge, a bridge I hadn't used in weeks. I knew they'd try it eventually. They did. The last team ran straight toward it, thinking it was their way out. But as soon as the third boot touched the middle plank, kaboom! The bridge exploded in a loud burst of air and paint, flinging 3 men into the water below. More screaming, more chaos. The HOA leader froze, mouth wide open. I turned on my loudspeaker. "Leave my ranch." He looked straight at my barn. "You're making a mistake," he screamed. "This is bigger than you." I leaned forward and shouted back, "And you're trespassing on federal soil." That was true. A small corner of my land, according to survey records, was classified under federal grazing rights. I had already sent a report to the Bureau of Land Management. If they acted without warrants here, it was game over. That's when I saw him raise his radio. He barked something fast. Seconds later, the remaining men regrouped behind the SUV. And then, another set of headlights appeared at the top of the ridge. Bigger. Brighter. Red and blue flashing. 3 county patrol trucks pulled up and blocked the road. For a moment, everything stood still. Then the loudspeaker from the lead truck blared. "Everyone on the ground, hands where we can see them." HOA's hired guns turned pale, but just as they dropped their weapons and got on the ground, something happened behind me. A low beep. A motion sensor I hadn't expected to go off. I spun around and checked my screen. There was movement inside my house. Someone else had gotten in, and this one didn't come through the front. They were already inside. I slid down the loft ladder so fast my boots burned on the rungs. Rusty and Bear barked like crazy outside, pacing near the barn door. I grabbed my flashlight and rushed across the yard toward the main house, staying low and out of sight. The air was tense. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. Whoever this person was, they hadn't triggered any mines. That meant they knew exactly where to step. Someone had studied my land. I opened the storm cellar and used the tunnel I had built months ago that connected to the main house. Quietly, I crept through the dark space, my flashlight off, relying on memory. I emerged inside the pantry just behind the kitchen. The moment I poked my head out, I heard footsteps upstairs, heavy boots, one person. I reached into my tool shelf and pulled out a flare gun, non-lethal, but up close it could blind someone long enough to handle them. I took the stairs slow. Every step creaked. At the top, I peeked around the corner. My bedroom door was slightly ajar, and the light was on. I nudged it open with my foot. A woman stood in the middle of the room wearing a black jacket and scanning my documents. She had a pistol holstered on her hip and a body cam on her chest. Her badge read, "Private Enforcement Officer, Willow Heights HOA." She turned suddenly and saw me. Before she could react, I raised the flare gun. "Don't move." She stared at me, surprised but calm. "You're Tom Reynolds?" "Last I checked," I said. "Care to explain why you're breaking into my home?" She raised her hands. "I was sent to collect evidence, that's all." "Evidence of what?" She smirked. "Of your resistance to HOA authority." I almost laughed. "Lady, you just committed a felony. You attacked hired enforcement officers. They were armed and trespassing on my land. I defended myself. You set traps." I nodded. All legal. Nothing lethal. Want to check the code book? She shifted uncomfortably, her smirk fading. I know what you're doing, she said. You think if you make this loud enough, messy enough, someone will step in. But HOA owns half the officials in this county. I stepped closer. That's so? She didn't respond. I've got cameras, recordings, satellite data, copies already uploaded and sent to my attorney, 2 local news outlets, and 3 veteran watchdog groups. Her jaw tightened. Now, I added, you've got 2 choices. Walk out, or get dragged out when the sheriff gets here. She glared at me but slowly started backing toward the door. You'll regret this, she muttered. No, I said. I think you will. Just then, the front door banged open downstairs. Tom? Called out a familiar voice. It's Deputy Harris. I sighed in relief. Upstairs. The officer appeared moments later with 2 others behind him. The woman was cuffed and led down without a word. Outside, the scene was chaos. The sheriff's deputies had rounded up the remaining intruders. Some had broken noses, others were covered in paint and mud. One man, the guy who had frozen earlier near the scarecrow, sat on the ground shaking. That was not worth the paycheck. Deputy Harris walked over to me. Tom, what the hell happened here? I handed him the HOA notice and the property boundary map I'd marked. They came with weapons. I defended myself and my ranch. Everything's documented. My cameras have it all. He nodded slowly. We'll have to file a full report, obviously. But from what I can see, this was unlawful entry. You think? I said, looking around at the chaos. This is the 3rd attack in 2 months. He raised an eyebrow. And what do you mean by 3rd? I walked him through everything. Fence cuts, poisoned tanks, mailbox explosion. Every incident. He was shocked but listened closely. This is way above my pay grade, he muttered after I finished. I'm gonna need to get the state involved. Do it, I said. The HOA clipboard guy was cuffed and loaded into the back of a cruiser. He stared at me with such hate, I swear if looks could kill, I'd be 6 feet under. But I stared right back, and then I went inside to finally sit down, shaking, exhausted, but alive. The next day things quieted down. For a while. The HOA was silent. No trucks, no agents, no calls. I kept the cameras running and my defenses active. Then, one evening, something strange happened. My internet dropped. Just like that, gone. No storm, no outage in the area. My neighbors still had theirs. I reset the router. Nothing. I checked the lines. They'd been cut. That same night, my water pressure dropped to a trickle. I went to the pump house and found it flooded. Someone had tampered with the water valve, leaving it half open and leaking. It was subtle, careful, but no mistake. This was sabotage. They were back, only this time they were quieter, smarter. Instead of an army at my front gate, they were trying to choke me out from the inside. I took the hint. If they wanted to play that game, I'd take it a step further. I called in a favor. One of my old Army buddies, Mason, now ran a private security consulting firm. When I told him everything, he said, "Give me 24 hours. I'll bring the cavalry." The next morning, he showed up with a truck full of gear and 3 ex-Marines, motion sensors, drone surveillance, backup power systems, and a satellite internet dish. In less than 48 hours, my ranch was tighter than Fort Knox. But even Mason looked worried. "Tom, this ain't just some snooty HOA. This is organized. You sure you don't want to sell?" I looked at the sunrise over my fields. No, I didn't bleed in Iraq to get bullied off my own land in Wyoming. He nodded. Then we'll stand our ground. And that night we got our next surprise. Just past midnight, one of the drones picked up movement on the south ridge. 3 SUVs parked under the trees. No headlights. Thermal scans showed figures moving toward the fence line, armed, not wearing uniforms. Again. But this time they had something new, bolt cutters and a chainsaw. "They're coming in quiet," Mason said, gripping his rifle. I gave the signal. The dogs were already in position. Rusty barked once, then took off. The lights flipped on. The siren started blaring. But instead of retreating like last time, the men rushed forward, straight toward the house, and one of them had a jerry can of gas. The sight of that jerry can hit me like a punch to the gut. "They're going to burn the house down," Mason yelled. I didn't wait. I bolted out the back door, yelling whistle commands to Rusty and Bear, who immediately flanked the nearest intruders. Mason and his team took up defensive positions, sweeping the field with night vision scopes. 3 of the men ran toward the main house, 1 with the gas can, 2 with what looked like stun batons. They weren't there to talk. They were there to send a message or finish what their last squad failed to do. I sprinted across the gravel drive and dove behind the tractor, aiming my flare gun again. The one with the gas can made it to the porch, started unscrewing the cap. "Drop it!" I shouted. He didn't. He pulled out a lighter. Mason fired a warning shot into the air. That did it. The man hesitated, then turned to run, but Bear lunged at him, grabbing his leg and yanking him down. The gas can flew and rolled under the porch, but the lighter skidded across the steps. Too close. Way too close. I ran forward, kicked the lighter far into the grass, and helped secure the man. His arm was bleeding from Bear's bite, but he didn't scream. He just stared at me with rage in his eyes. "You think this is over?" he growled. "No," I said. "I think this is just getting started." Mason's team was handling the others. 2 of the intruders had already been zip-tied and tossed face down in the dirt. The 3rd tried to run but got tackled by Rusty and landed flat on his back, groaning. We called the sheriff. Again. Deputy Harris arrived faster than ever before, this time with a full SWAT unit in tow. Apparently someone higher up had seen the footage I'd sent to the state attorney. "Tom," Harris said as he surveyed the scene, "I swear every time I come here it looks like a war zone." "Because it is," I said calmly. "They won't stop." He took down statements, arrested the new batch of intruders, and promised a full investigation. But I knew how these things worked. It would be weeks, maybe months, before any legal action could catch up with these HOA lunatics. And in the meantime, they'd just keep coming. That night, after the sheriff left, Mason and I sat by the fire pit with his crew, sipping black coffee. The stars above were bright, but the air felt heavy. "Someone's funding this," Mason said. "This isn't just your average homeowners association. This is organized, militarized. You sure you know who owns the HOA?" I shook my head. "I've tried digging. Public records lead nowhere. The president changes every 6 months. The only common link is that clipboard guy, Mark Chandler." Mason nodded. "We need to hit them back, but legally." "What do you have in mind?" "Expose them. Go public. You have video evidence, attack logs, audio. We build a dossier, then go to the press. People love a David vs. Goliath story, especially if David's a rancher and a veteran." I leaned back in my chair. He was right. If I wanted to win this, I had to go bigger than my land. I had to make noise. The next morning I began uploading every clip, every incident, and every police report to a secure cloud drive. I called in favors from 2 journalists I'd met during a veterans fundraiser years back. They agreed to visit and do a full expose. But before they even arrived, the power went out. Every breaker in the house blew at once. No storm, no warning. Mason checked the generator. It had been tampered with. The wires were clipped clean with precision. Even the backup battery pack was smashed. And next to the pump house we found another note. But this time it was handwritten in red ink. "Turn off your cameras, or we'll turn off your lights, for good." Mason's crew swept the entire ranch, guns drawn. I checked the perimeter logs, no alerts, no sensor triggers. They had slipped through again. That's when I realized someone on the inside must be feeding them information, but who? I trusted Mason and his guys. They'd served with me overseas, and the sheriff's office hadn't been anywhere near my place since last night. I checked my satellite feed. One of the sensors near the mailbox had been moved. It wasn't broken, just shifted, angled toward the road instead of the driveway. A decoy. Someone had gotten close enough to move it without setting anything off. Then I noticed something even more chilling. In the camera feed from the west barn, a figure stood still for nearly 45 minutes during the night. Too still to be natural. It was a dummy, wearing a Willow Heights HOA vest. I zoomed in. Strapped to its chest was a GoPro. I ran to the west barn immediately. When I got there, the dummy was gone. Only a note hung on the wall, pinned with a knife. Every trap has a blind spot. That night, I couldn't sleep. The lines had blurred. This was no longer about boundaries or dues. This was psychological warfare. And then, just before sunrise, the drone alarm went off again. 3 new figures were walking straight toward the fence. This time, no weapons. They wore suits, and behind them was a truck with a giant LED screen. As I watched from my scope, the screen turned on, and a face appeared. Mark Chandler, clipboard guy. Only now he wore a blazer and sat behind a desk. Tom Reynolds, his voice boomed through speakers across the ranch. You have made a mockery of Willow Heights authority. You've resisted peace offerings, turned to violence, and endangered the integrity of this community. I clenched my jaw. Now, he said, you leave us no choice. Behind him, a logo flashed on the screen. Willow Heights Land Acquisition Corps. A second banner followed. Your land now falls under Section 14E, Emergency Eminent Domain. I almost laughed out loud. They were trying to legally steal my ranch now. He continued. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises. After that, we are authorized to proceed with removal. I turned to Mason. We've got 2 days, I said. Mason nodded, a grim smile forming on his face. Then we fortify every inch. I looked out at my land, at the barn, the hills, the creek. I'm done defending, I said. Time to fight back. And deep in my gut, I knew. The next time they came, they wouldn't just bring threats. They'd bring an army. For the next 48 hours, my ranch became a fortress. We stopped sleeping. Mason and his guys took shifts monitoring drones, while I reinforced entry points with steel plating and barbed wire. We even mounted motion-triggered alarms onto fence posts, disguised as regular ranch lights. Every trail in or out was mapped, remapped, then booby-trapped. And the minefield expanded. But this time we added decoys, dummy pressure pads, exploding dirt bags, and noisemakers hidden under loose boards. It wasn't just about keeping them out. It was about confusing them, disorienting them, and making them regret every step they took onto my land. Still, something didn't feel right. Mark Chandler's voice from that screen kept replaying in my head. Too calm, too controlled. The kind of guy who knew he had something up his sleeve. The kind of guy who didn't bluff. And then, 36 hours later, it started. Just after sunset, the sky lit up, not from lightning, but from floodlights mounted on 2 armored trucks slowly crawling up my west ridge. They brought backup. A full convoy of vehicles. 2 trucks, 4 black SUVs, and a white command van. I counted at least 20 men, fully suited in tactical gear, flanking the trucks. But it wasn't just mercenaries this time. They had bulldozers. One of them had the audacity to carry a big banner that read, Property Reclamation in Progress, authorized by Willow Heights. Mason looked through his nightscope and growled, They're really gonna try it. Let them, I said. Let's make them regret ever stepping foot on rancher land. The first bulldozer rammed my outer fence. The wood splintered like toothpicks, and the metal gate crumpled like paper. They kept moving forward, slow but steady. The ranch lights clicked off. Then the mines started going off, loud, blinding flashes of sound and dust. The front line staggered. Men yelled and tripped, some crashing into each other as they tried to retreat. But others pressed forward. A new team in gas masks ran through the smoke and deployed tear gas toward the barn. They were trying to force us out. Inside, I grabbed the gas masks Mason had brought and handed them out. We slipped into position. The backfield was the weakest point on the ranch, and they knew it. The bulldozer circled that way, and I saw it lining up for another strike, this time aimed at the tool shed. But what they didn't know was that I'd buried a surprise beneath the grass there, something I called the rattlesnake. A series of hidden noise-triggered canisters buried shallow under the dirt, set to explode with a boom if heavy machinery passed over them. The second the bulldozer's front tread rolled over the patch, boom. The machine jolted, lifted briefly off the ground, then slammed down crooked. The engine died, smoke poured from the side, and the driver leapt out coughing, covered in blue dust and hay debris. The crowd of mercs started yelling, confused. From my lookout tower, I used the loudspeaker. "This land is private property. You are trespassing under Title 18, Section 241 of the U.S. Code. Turn around now." Mark Chandler stepped out of the white van. He was wearing a tailored suit, holding a microphone. "I warned you, Reynolds," he said calmly. "You chose war." Then he looked directly into the camera lens mounted on my tower and said, "So here's your headline." He raised a hand. The second bulldozer started rolling, this time toward the barn. Mason muttered, "If that thing hits the propane tank." "I know," I said, grabbing the long-range flare launcher. "I need to disable it before it gets too close. Cover me." Mason and his guys laid down distraction fire, loud enough to make the bulldozer team duck. I sprinted out the side of the barn, zigzagging toward the ridge. The flare gun was locked and ready. I aimed for the cabin roof beside the bulldozer's path, right where I'd hidden one of the sonic trigger floodlights. Whoosh! The flare exploded above, lighting up the entire field. The bulldozer halted. Confused and partially blinded, the driver paused just long enough for Mason's guy to shoot the tires with rubberized piercing rounds. The front left tread collapsed. The bulldozer leaned sideways and slammed into the dirt, powerless. Cheers erupted from my radio. But that joy didn't last. Because from the rear of the command van, a final figure stepped out, and everything went dead quiet. The man was huge, built like a tank, bald, sunglasses even at night. But what chilled me wasn't his look, it was the patch on his black vest. Federal Asset Enforcement, Private Division. Mason looked through his scope and swore. That's a Fed contract group, not just HOA muscle. I narrowed my eyes. Why would the HOA have a federal contractor? The man raised a megaphone. "Tom Reynolds, you are now classified under Section 14E2, Civilian Occupancy Disruption. You will be removed with force. Stand down, or we proceed." I grabbed the mic on the loudspeaker. "I have legal deeds. I have county land surveys. I'm not standing down." "No response necessary," he said. He waved forward a team of 6 black-suited men carrying what looked like battering rams and cutting saws. They weren't playing anymore. They were going to try to drag me out physically. That's when Mason tapped my shoulder and whispered, "We gotta fall back to the interior line. Let them come in, then spring the trap." I nodded. We left the barn and retreated to the inner courtyard of the ranch, where we'd prepared a layered defense. Tire stacks, rope tripwires, even a concealed trench hidden under planks. The first team of 6 made it through the smoke and broken fences. They kicked down the front door of the ranch house, only no one was inside. The moment the last man crossed the threshold, crash! The entire ceiling dropped a net on them, custom woven from barbed cable and farm mesh. They were tangled in an instant, screaming. But that wasn't the shocking part. From behind the house, we heard helicopter blades. A spotlight hit the barn, and then a voice over a bullhorn. "This is the Bureau of Land Management and the Wyoming State Attorney General's office. All armed personnel are ordered to stand down immediately." Everyone froze. I grabbed my binoculars. A team of actual federal agents was descending from the helicopter, real uniforms, real badges. Behind them, 2 black SUVs with U.S. Marshal plates drove onto the field. One of the officers, a tall woman with a badge that read Deputy Director Langley, stepped forward with a folder in her hand. "I'm here to investigate land seizure corruption under false HOA authority," she said calmly. Mr. Reynolds, you're coming with us to provide evidence. The rest of you," she turned toward the black-suited mercs, "are under arrest pending federal charges." I opened the gate. She smiled, and just as she stepped forward to shake my hand, a sniper shot rang out. The bullet hit the ground inches from her foot. Everyone dropped. She screamed, "We're under fire." Mason tackled me to the ground and yelled, "They've got Overwatch." "From where?" I shouted, but I already knew. There was one place I hadn't checked in days: the grain silo. The grain silo loomed like a giant shadow against the moonlit sky. I cursed under my breath. "They've been hiding someone up there this whole time." Mason didn't waste a second. "I'll go. You stay with the agent." "No," I said, pushing myself to my feet. "That's my land, my silo. I'm ending this." Mason looked at me hard but nodded. He knew better than to argue. I bolted across the courtyard, ducking behind the tractor as another shot rang out and pinged off the barn's metal roof. This wasn't a warning shot anymore. They were aiming to kill. From the corner of my eye, I saw Langley's agents fanning out, weapons raised, scanning the field for movement. Her team was quick, but the shooter had the high ground and complete cover. If we didn't stop him now, someone was going to die. I slipped through the livestock pen, cut around the chicken coop, and reached the silo's base. I paused, listening. Another shot, this time toward the Fed's SUV. The bullet shattered the rear window. I gritted my teeth and climbed the ladder on the side of the silo, one rung at a time, slowly and silently. About 3/4 of the way up, I stopped. There it was. A small wooden platform had been set up just below the metal dome, camouflaged with feed sacks and canvas. Lying belly down on it was a man in full tactical gear with a silenced rifle, scanning the scene through his scope. He hadn't seen me yet. I climbed the last few rungs fast, heart hammering. Then I leapt onto the platform and tackled him from behind. We crashed into the silo wall, his rifle skidding across the planks. He elbowed me in the side hard. I gasped but didn't let go. He tried to reach for a knife strapped to his thigh, but I grabbed his wrist and slammed it into the metal support beam. "Who sent you?" I shouted, my voice raw. He didn't answer, just snarled and spat in my face. Wrong move. I grabbed the flare launcher from my belt and jammed it under his chin. "Talk, or I light up your head like a bonfire." His eyes widened. He hesitated. "Chandler," he croaked. "Mark Chandler. He's not just HOA. He's working with Horizon Assets." I frowned. "What's Horizon Assets?" He looked away. "They buy land, force out owners, resell to foreign investors, clean the records, hide the money. Chandler's just the front." "Why my land?" "Because underneath your ranch," he whispered, "is a newly discovered lithium vein. You're sitting on billions." My blood turned cold. That's why they came so hard. That's why they risked federal charges. This wasn't about fences or HOA dues. It was about control, about resources. And I was standing in the way. I knocked him unconscious with the butt of the flare gun and tied him to the platform, using old bungee cords and baling twine. I climbed down fast, rage burning in my chest. When I got back to the courtyard, Langley's team had pushed the attackers back. Mason was crouched beside the porch with Rusty at his side, gun still raised. "Shooters tied up," I called out. "Silo platform." Langley turned sharply. "You got him?" "He confessed," I said. "There's more to this than HOA harassment. It's a full-on land grab by a shell company called Horizon Assets. Chandler's the face, but the money runs deep." Langley's eyes narrowed. "We suspected this. We just didn't have the final piece." I pulled out the body cam I'd snatched off the attacker. "Now you do." She grabbed it and turned to her team. "Secure the ranch, bring that shooter down, and someone call DC. We've got an open case." Her team spread out, arresting the last few armed men who hadn't already been zip-tied or tackled. The armored trucks were seized. The fake HOA banners were ripped down. For the first time in weeks, my ranch was quiet again. As the sun began to rise, Langley stood beside me on the porch. "You're lucky you didn't get killed." I shrugged. I'm lucky I had friends. She turned to Mason and nodded in respect. You trained these guys well. He grinned. They don't make 'em like Reynolds anymore. Langley took a deep breath. We'll be issuing warrants by noon. Chandler's going down. Horizon Assets is next. I promise you that. Good, I said, because I'm not moving an inch. She smiled. We'll protect your land now. You've earned it. But just as we started to breathe again, another drone alert went off, this time from the airspace perimeter. Mason checked the monitor and froze. Tom, we got a new problem. I turned to the screen. A small private jet was descending fast, heading straight toward the makeshift airstrip 12 miles from the ranch. Langley radioed her team. Do we have air support in that area? The response crackled back. Negative, that jet's unauthorized. I zoomed in on the drone feed. The tail number was barely visible, but it was enough for Langley to start cursing under her breath. What is it? I asked. She turned to me slowly. That jet belongs to one of Horizon's top executives. If they're coming here personally and they're not done yet. I squared my shoulders. Then neither am I. The private jet touched down just after 7 a.m. It was sleek, silver, and definitely not the kind of aircraft that belonged anywhere near a cattle ranch. A convoy of 3 matte black luxury SUVs pulled up to meet it, their tinted windows hiding whoever was inside. My drone feed captured every second, transmitting live back to our command station in the barn loft. Langley's face turned pale. That's Henry Stokes, she muttered. Who? I asked, standing beside her. She glanced at me like I'd just asked what a horse was. CEO of Horizon Assets, billionaire, real estate tycoon, the guy behind dozens of forced land sales all over the Midwest. Always clean, never caught. And he just flew out to my ranch? Langley nodded. Which means he's not here to negotiate. He's here to clean up a mess. Mason, who'd been watching silently, cracked his knuckles. I say we give him a welcome party. Langley held up her hand. No, we need to be smart. If he steps foot on your land, we can arrest him for conspiracy and trespassing, but only if we don't engage first. I nodded slowly. Then we wait. The next few hours dragged on like days. The sun was high, casting hard shadows over the fields. Everyone was on edge. Langley's agent set up checkpoints around the ranch perimeter. Mason and I loaded up more cameras, made sure every angle was covered. I even wired my front porch swing to record audio, just in case this billionaire wanted to talk. At exactly 10:14 a.m., the dust trail appeared down the southern ridge, the 3 SUVs, coming straight toward us. I stood on the porch, arms crossed, Mason and Langley just behind me. Rusty and Bear sat growling low, their ears twitching. The vehicles pulled to a stop 10 feet from the gate. A man stepped out of the front SUV, tall, tan skin, perfect hair, and a smug smile that made me want to knock out his teeth. He wore a crisp suit that probably cost more than my truck and shiny shoes completely unsuited for Wyoming soil. Henry Stokes. He waved like we were old friends. Mr. Reynolds, he said with mock cheer. Beautiful day, isn't it? Cut the crap, I said flatly. You've got 30 seconds before you're charged with trespassing. He laughed like it was all a big joke. Easy, cowboy. I just came to talk. Langley stepped forward. Then talk from the other side of that gate. His eyes flicked to her badge. Ah, government muscle. Figures. You've been orchestrating illegal land takeovers through a fake HOA network, she said. We have video, audio, and a full confession from your hired sniper. You're not getting this land. Stokes's face stayed calm. Too calm. I don't want this land, he said. I want what's under it. I didn't blink. Too bad. You'll have to dig through me first. He raised an eyebrow. Do you even know what it's worth? I don't care. You should, he said, because I'm about to offer you $50 million for it. Right now. Cash. Walk away today and none of this ever happened. Mason whistled low. He's desperate. I shook my head. Not for sale. Stokes dropped his fake smile. You think you're a hero, but you're just in the way. This land will be seized, if not by HOA, then by eminent domain. We already have officials lined up. Judges, surveyors. You're one signature away from being bulldozed. Langley stepped forward, holding up her badge. That's where you're wrong, Mr. Stokes. You're under investigation for federal fraud, bribery, land theft, and obstruction of justice. And now, thanks to you stepping on this ranch, you've added criminal trespassing. Stokes didn't flinch. You don't have jurisdiction here. Langley smiled. Actually, I do. She waved her hand. From behind the barn, a black government SUV rolled up. Out stepped two federal marshals in full uniform. Stokes's expression finally cracked. The lead marshal said, "Henry Stokes, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and multiple violations of land acquisition law. Hands where we can see them." One of Stokes's bodyguards reached for something. Bang! A warning shot rang out. Langley's team moved in fast. "Drop your weapons." Stokes's men hesitated, but after a moment of heavy silence, they obeyed, raising their hands. The marshals cuffed Stokes and began reading him his rights. And I swear, the moment those cuffs clicked around his wrists, it felt like I could breathe for the first time in weeks. Langley turned to me, smiling. "It's over." But I wasn't smiling. Because as they led Stokes away, he turned to me and said one last thing. "You think this ends with me? You think I'm the top? This goes way higher than you know, Reynolds. You just picked a fight with a machine that never stops." Then he was shoved into the SUV and driven away. The wind blew gently across the field. The birds chirped again. My dogs finally lay down in the grass, calm for the first time in days. Langley looked at me. "He's bluffing." "I'm not so sure," I said, staring off toward the horizon. "But if he's not bluffing..." I clenched my fists. They better know I'm not either. But just when I thought we had reached peace, Mason jogged over from the side fence holding something. "Tom, you're gonna want to see this." He handed me a tablet connected to one of the new surveillance drones we'd placed 2 miles south. The live feed showed 5 bulldozers, 10 men in reflective vests, and a sign being posted in the middle of the valley trail. "Commercial excavation, Horizon Mining Zone C1. I stared at it, stunned. "They filed new papers," Mason said grimly. "Not for your land, for the bordering federal zone." Langley's jaw clenched. "If they drill into that vein from the outside, they'll drain it dry," I whispered, "without ever stepping foot on my ranch." And just like that, the war wasn't over. It was just starting again. The next morning, the sky was a perfect blue, but to me it looked like the color of war. I stood on the hill behind the barn, watching the bulldozers line up on the ridge just beyond my southern boundary. They were setting up base camp, white tents, heavy-duty generators, trailers with air conditioning units. Langley stood beside me with a pair of binoculars. They filed permits under a shell company based out of Nevada. Horizon Assets isn't listed anywhere on the paperwork, but the LLC trails lead back to them. "They're going to siphon the lithium right from under me," I said bitterly. "Skirt the law by mining just inches outside my fence." She nodded slowly. "They'll pump into the vein and drain the whole deposit. Legally, you can't stop them unless the drilling affects your land." I looked at her. "And who decides that?" She sighed. "The Bureau of Land Management. It'll take months, maybe years." "I don't have months." Langley gave me a look. "You're not thinking of going down there?" "I'm thinking," I said, "that sometimes the only way to get the right attention is to be louder than the bulldozers." That evening, I put the word out. To my fellow veterans, to every rancher I'd met in my years of working this land, to every journalist who covered Stokes's arrest, to every environmental activist with a blog. By the next afternoon, they started to arrive. Pickup trucks, motorcycles, RVs, dozens of them. Flags waving, cameras rolling, ranchers with sunburned faces and hard eyes, veterans in their old uniforms, reporters with live stream rigs, signs that read, "Hands off our land" and "Fight for the farmers." Mason stood beside me on the porch, arms folded. "You've turned this into a movement." "No," I said. "They did." Langley's agents helped set up a perimeter. They couldn't legally interfere with the mining operation yet, but they could protect us from retaliation. I wasn't going to fight this war underground anymore. We lit bonfires, gave interviews, let the world see what was happening in the heart of America. On day 3, a CNN drone circled overhead. On day 5, the mining crews stopped digging and began building walls around the site to block camera angles. On day 7, the state governor made a public statement calling for a thorough review of all mineral rights and land acquisitions across Wyoming. And on day 8, just when I thought it couldn't get crazier, a convoy of black SUVs rolled up my dirt road again. But this time they weren't from Horizon. They were from Washington. The man who stepped out was older, silver-haired, and flanked by Secret Service. Langley's mouth dropped. "Is that who I think it is?" It was the Secretary of the Interior. He walked up the porch steps and extended his hand. "Mr. Reynolds," he said, "you've stirred up quite the storm." "Just trying to protect what's mine," I said. "You've done more than that," he replied. "Your footage, the media, your stand, it's exposed a multi-billion-dollar scheme. We've launched a full federal probe into Horizon assets and their ties to corrupt officials nationwide." I swallowed. "And the drilling?" "Ceased," he said. "Effective immediately. The permits were revoked. Every operation on the ridge is frozen under federal investigation." I didn't say anything. I just closed my eyes and exhaled. But then he added, "There's one more thing. We're designating your ranch and the surrounding area as a federally protected agricultural zone. No more mining, no more land grabs, ever." The weight of everything, weeks of fear, pressure, and fighting, fell off my shoulders like a landslide. My knees buckled slightly. Mason grabbed my arm, steadying me. Langley stepped forward and said what we were all thinking. "You just made history, Tom." The secretary smiled. "That's not all." He handed me a sealed envelope. I opened it. Inside was a certificate, signed by the president himself, recognizing my ranch as a National Heritage Homestead, protected for life, backed by federal enforcement. I looked up. He added, "And if you're willing, the government would like to buy a conservation easement for the land you don't use, so it stays untouched forever. We'll pay you fair value. You still own the land. But no one, not Horizon, not any company, can ever touch it." I smiled, the kind of smile that goes all the way down to your bones. "I'll think about it," I said. He laughed. "You've earned the right." The following weeks were a blur of media, cleanup, and celebration. Stokes was denied bail. Multiple county officials resigned. Willow Heights HOA was dissolved. And as for the ranch, it was still mine. The sunsets were brighter. The wind was sweeter. And for once, the land felt truly, completely free. One evening, I sat on my porch with Mason, Rusty curled at my feet, Bear snoozing under the steps. "You ever think about what would have happened if we'd just let them have it?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "They'd be a little richer." "And we'd be a lot smaller," he added. I nodded. "But we didn't." He clinked his beer bottle against mine. "To standing your ground." And I raised mine. "To never backing down." As the stars blinked into view and the crickets sang their nighttime song, I thought about everything we'd survived. The battles, the threats, the traps, the betrayals, but also the courage, the unity, the reminder that sometimes it only takes one person saying no to wake up a nation. And if anyone ever came again, I'd be ready, because now, this land is mine forever. If you love this story, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe for more real justice tales, and comment below. What would you do if the HOA tried to take your land? More HOA nightmares ranch revenge, and underdog stories coming soon.